Hi, Miranda. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing so great. I'm so excited to hear all of your stories and to chat about birth with you. So, before we really get into your birth stories, though, let's first find out a little bit about you. Tell us about you, your family, your work.
Yeah. Well, my name's Miranda Sladen. Um, I'm married to my husband, Zach. We've been married for like 7.5 years. We have three girls, and they're like 4.5, 2.5, and then 2 months. We homestead, so we live about like 45 minutes out of town in a smaller town, and we have a dairy cow and chickens and usually a garden, but not right now because I pumped the brakes on that while I was super pregnant. So we'll try to touch back in the fall and get a good fall garden going. Um, and then I'm a doula. So I'm a postpartum and birth doula and a childbirth educator. And so that is super fun. So I get to be a mom now. I've worked full time forever, and this is my first season to just like be fully mom and doula. So I'm really excited to step into this season.
That's so fun. So, I would love to know what came first, your kind of interest in birth or motherhood. Were you already kind of involved or interested in the birth world, or did that come following your birth experience?
That came following my birth experience. So I was like a full time nanny in high school and babysat a ton of kids. So I've always loved being with kiddos from babies all the way up. I was like very familiar with children. So I knew I wanted kids, but I was just, the birth stuff was just came alongside that. I figured that out as I went. But I definitely had my first kid and then
Yeah.
was like, wait, I absolutely love this. And that's kind of where everything started for me with birth work.
That's so cool because I am exactly the same. I got my first like babysitter club certification at 12,
Yes.
that my grandma had me do. And so I babysat and nannied from the time I was 12 until probably, gosh, I mean, who am I kidding? I still babysit. I'm
Yeah.
gonna be the babysitter forever. I feel like I'm never gonna get to be the cool mom. I mean, my birth work is my main thing, but somehow I just cannot get away from the babysitting gigs. So here I am at 32, and I still weekly babysit. But
If it
anyway,
helps you feel better, I am a mom of three and still will babysit my friends' kids. I'll be like, oh yeah, just bring them over. I'll watch all the children all the time. So I don't think you
yeah,
ever truly like outgrow that.
yeah, yeah. I still feel 15 forever. Like I said, I'm 32, but I still feel like the 15-year-old babysitter. But it's fine. It's fine. Okay, well, so that's fun that we have that in common. I would honestly be surprised if most birth workers don't have the babysitting thing in common.
Truly.
So, how long have you been doing birth work?
A year now. So my first births were in April of 2024. So I jumped into like getting my delisting a little bit before then, but as far as seeing births, uh, it's been about a year.
Okay, well, let's jump right into your birth stories. I know we're probably going to spend the most time focusing on the third one, but I'd love to establish a little bit of backstory and share your first two birth experiences as well. So, if you would, yeah, just go ahead and jump in and tell us all about baby number one. What was your pregnancy like? What sort of prep work did you do? Research? What was your mindset like going into that first birth? All of those sort of things.
Okay, I feel like I can't jump into the first birth without giving like a little bit of background on like my medical history to kind of bring it all together. So I'll jump in here and then we'll pick up on my first birth.
Yeah.
But so I was hospitalized and spent like 72 days in the ICU in critical care with 5% chance of living. So I should not be here, but thankfully, because of the medical system and a
Oh
lot
my
of prayer,
gosh.
I get to be here and share a little bit of my story. Um, and so, leading up to my first birth, my husband and I decided, like, okay, like we want to start trying to have kids, and shift gears a little bit, but everything was like always held with super open hands because we weren't sure if my body would like one, get pregnant, allow me to carry a pregnancy, or what birth would be like, and like what the baby's health would be like in utero. And so there was just a lot of question. Anyway, so we got pregnant and thankfully had a very healthy pregnancy. And she was my COVID baby. So I was I guess like halfway through my pregnancy whenever COVID kind of became a thing. And we were pulled
Oh,
home
wow.
and worked remote. And I was honestly thankful for it. It was great for my pregnancy because I wasn't stuck behind a desk. We repainted our whole house and I was able to be up and moving around, and like the work from home balance during pregnancy was so great. And so my body felt great physically. We had to be extra cautious because my medical history with my sickness is has everything to do with my lungs. Basically, they stop processing oxygen, and so I just have really like low lung capacity for a normal person, and so everything was like, okay, I can't actually get COVID because that would probably put my body under. And so we were somewhat cautious during that pregnancy, but we were able to spend so much time together and got the baby's nursery painted and all this stuff. So it was really sweet. And like physically, I felt great. Emotionally, it was just a weird time. Like it was one of those, okay, come what may, like this is great. We'll just figure it out as we go. But it was just uncharted. It was just weird. But it was good. I enjoyed that pregnancy. We did like a drive-by baby shower and just all the random things that one would do during COVID.
Aw,
But it was still really sweet. We found out her
I
gender.
remember those.
Yeah. We did find out her gender just because like I felt like people couldn't really connect to the pregnancy or like to us very well during that time. And so we're like, oh, if we could share her gender with everybody and give them somewhat of a connection, like the grandparents and everybody. So it was fun to like navigate all of that, I would say. But yeah, that's kind of like how that pregnancy went.
Wow, I can't imagine being pregnant and having COVID happen and having the medical history that you do. I mean, I know you said that you enjoyed that pregnancy, and I love that for you. But I can't imagine how scary that could have been, or probably was, for you. That's so heavy.
Yeah, there was a lot of unknown, but it was definitely like the Lord was so faithful in that time to just bring a lot of peace in that season. So I was, it was like, it was a really sweet season for sure.
That's really great. I would love to hear then, moving forward, toward the end of pregnancy, how you went about planning for your birth experience and what sort of prep or research you did in getting ready for that, especially with COVID. I mean, goodness, that's so big.
Yeah, it was like a double whammy of the unknown of my medical history on top of like the unknown of the like COVID policies that were changing daily. I mean, it was constantly like, oh, you can't have a support person. You can't have a support person. You'll have to wear a mask the whole time. You don't have to wear a mask the whole time. I mean, it was just everything changed daily. So there was no reason in keeping up with it. It was like, whenever I go into labor, we'll just figure out what it looks like that day. But I was going to absolutely fight tooth and nail to have my husband there. Thankfully, we didn't have to. He was able to be there. So, for her, so I live in College Station. We have a great birth working community here, but nobody was quite qualified for my unknown past medical history. And so we found an OB here, but she worked alongside a MFM team in Houston. And so I would go to like the Woodlands to get more in-depth like work, like scans done and stuff like that during pregnancy. And so whenever it came down to the end of pregnancy, I just really felt like a pull to deliver in Houston. She was like, I want you to make the decision. We can figure it out here and just like hope that we are equipped to handle anything that might come. Everything looked good. Baby looked good. But with my past medical stuff, I was hospitalized in College Station, and I was so I was like so fragile they couldn't life flight me to Houston, which is where I probably should have been. And so just that transition couldn't even happen. So they ended up life flighting equipment to our hospital with trained, like coming on and training nurses in real time, with like a rotoprone bed and things like that that I needed at the time. And so that kind of sat with me of, you know, should baby need higher NICU care? Should something go south with me during delivery? I'd rather just go ahead and be settled where I need to probably be seen after that, like if my lungs were to collapse or something during delivery. I'm kind of one of those like, hey, let's think worst case scenario and work backwards from there and hope for the best type people, which works out for what I do. But, and so we actually relocated for a month prior to my due date. So we found a sweet, sweet couple that allowed us to stay in like their mother-in-law suite in Houston that wasn't too far from the hospital. And we packed up all of our work stuff and stayed there for a whole month. And then coming to the end of pregnancy, they were really, really pushing for induction, which I had put off a little bit, but also wanted to hear their concern. And the concern was a big baby, which now knowing all that I know, I'm like, that's not a concern at all. But at the time it was like, oh, they are like thinking I'll have a 9+ pound baby. And that's probably going to be a lot on my body with my low lung capacity. And so it made sense. But spoiler alert, she was born at 6 pounds, 12 ounces. She was indeed not a big baby, but we did induce. And I would say it was a really smooth induction. It's like everything that you hope an induction will be. We went in at like 7 p.m., started on Pitocin. I was already 3 centimeters dilated. My body was like somewhat sporadically contracting. So my body had like started doing some work. I had lost my mucus plug. So I was probably like in very, very early stages of labor already. And so the induction worked great. And she was born within like 8 hours of the start of the induction process. So I would say it was like a fairly fast induction for a first-time mom. But yeah, I mean, it was still a beautiful birth. I got an epidural, and it was just what that birth needed to be, which is something like I preach a lot as a doula of like, hey, you know, all these decisions stack up and ultimately it ends up being what it needs to be to get this baby here. So yeah, it was a really like sweet birth that I still look back on like very fondly. It was sweet for like us being first time parents and in the hospital by herself, nobody could come. So it was like, oh, we didn't have the option to have family or anything like that up there after delivery. So we just got to hang out and bond together in the hospital and come home to some family. So, but yeah, I will say like, so the medical history did step into this birth to where I was pushing on my back. I ended up delivering. I loved my nurse, absolutely loved her. She was incredible. I delivered with a hospitalist and a resident, and I did not have a fantastic experience with them. The resident in particular, the hospitalist was good. She was just teaching him though. So she was allowing him to catch the baby and like do all this stuff. And so it was like it was added on top of the just wonky experience, right? But there was just some things looking back of like, oh, okay, I want to change that. And one of that was my oxygen did end up dropping pretty good right after pushing. They had threatened to use a vacuum. I hadn't pushed for very long, but I'm guessing she was decelling at that time. And so they were like, hey, either baby comes out in this next push or we like are going to have to pull out the vacuum. So they were prepping the room for that. And I was like, no, we're not. And so I seriously pushed her out in like one push after that. And she delivered Head and Shoulders. And like, it was very quick. Just at the threat of them using a vacuum, I was like, absolutely not. So a lot probably stacked up to my oxygen levels dropping so badly. One, probably adrenaline. Two, pushing really hard, holding my breath. And three, being on my back with an epidural. And so that was like the point of like, okay, if we do this again, here's what I want to change. Everything else is great. But I like do not want an epidural because I want to be able to work with my body better to then in turn be able to breathe and work with my lungs better. And so that's kind of what shifted gears for me for the next birth.
Again, like I'm just blown away by how much you had going on throughout that pregnancy, yet how fondly you remember it, but also just how go with the flow and chill you seemed to be through all of that. I mean, having such a major health concern, giving birth during COVID, relocating and moving for an entire month before you have your baby, like that's so much to carry. And so I'm just so happy for you that you carried it well and that you have fond memories of that experience.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was a birthday. It was the birth of my first baby. And so like even my moms that I see through traumatic births, I would say the Lord's gift to us is that we still remember it as a birthday. And so I don't know, it was sweet. But there were definitely things that I was like, okay, now I've had my first and here is what I can shift with for the next. And I think I've taken each pregnancy journey and birth similarly of like, we can't control birth, so we hold everything with open hands. And we just do better as we know better and go from there.
Yeah, so let's shift right into that second birth then. I know you've kind of mentioned it already that you wanted to definitely wanted to try to go unmedicated the second time. So I know you'll mention that again. But yeah, I would love to hear a little bit about that story. You can kind of share maybe like how long before you were pregnant again with your second and anything that you kind of did differently or hoped to do differently, planned differently, that sort of thing. And yeah, just share that story with us.
Sure. My oldest two are exactly 2 years apart, like 2 years and 4 days apart. So they both have August birthdays. And so they were closer together. I wanted like
Wow.
about the 2 year spacing. That's what my siblings and I all had. And we grew up fairly closely. And I just enjoyed that gap. So I was like, oh, it felt right at the time. I had baby fever. I was like, okay, I want another baby. And so it was super sweet. That pregnancy was really different than my first. I feel like I was stuck at a desk all day, every day. And so I had a ton of just discomfort through that pregnancy. On top of chasing a toddler, we were in the potty training seasons and like all of this. And so it was just a lot on my body. And I wasn't like as proactive at caring for myself as I wished I would have been. But it was still like, I still enjoyed pregnancy. I really enjoy pregnancy. I feel like honestly the most myself whenever I'm pregnant. I feel like it's a very empowering like season of life for me. I just enjoy the bump and feeling all the kicks. And so that didn't change. It was just more uncomfortable. And so I went to 40 and 6, which was mentally challenging with that one. I went past due and just felt like that baby was going to stay in there forever and ever. And because I was so uncomfortable, I was like, oh, this is why people induce. This all makes sense to me. I was hard-headed enough to be like, absolutely not. I shifted a lot going off of my first birth experience. I knew I wanted different care and just a different delivery experience. And so I went with a certified nurse midwife within the hospital system. And so we have one here where we live. And I thankfully got in with her and had a phenomenal care experience with her. And she's she's great at her job, but very laid back. And so I was still overseen by an OB, just because, again, of my like high risk, my previous pregnancy being high risk. Though this one wasn't, it was kind of still a team effort. So the OB was like, she cannot go past 41 weeks. Really, they wanted to induce before 40, but the midwife was kind of like, hey, here are concerns. And then she'd just leave. And I was like, okay, thank you. And so I left my 40-week appointment and didn't set a 41-week appointment because I did not want to set an induction. I was like, absolutely not. Fine, the baby's fine. Obviously, if there was any concern, I would have addressed that, but there was just not a lot of good sound concern aside from your body probably shouldn't go past 41. And so I just left my 40-week appointment and walked right past the front desk. I've since became friends with that certified nurse midwife that I worked with. And I apologized to her for being her worst patient, but she just laughed. She's like, it's okay. Your baby came. And she did come at 40 and 6. This one was a surprise gender, so we didn't know what she was going to be. And that was so much fun. I thought it was a lot of fun. Everybody else did not seem to think it was. Everybody wants to know the gender and the name. And what if we need to put initials on onesies and all this stuff? But I was like, oh, we don't know. This is way more fun to have a surprise gender. And so, yeah, that I did go into labor finally. I was prodromal for 3 weeks though. So I had prodromal labor, very consistent contractions for 3 solid weeks. Every single night from like 6 p.m. till 10 p.m. my body would contract regularly, good contractions, and it was exhausting, and it was mentally just such a mind game. My husband's aunt is a midwife, and I called her one day. I was like, maybe even the day before. I was past due, but I was like, I'm done. What can I do? And she was like, has anybody ever told you about a precipitous birth? I'm like, no. She's like, sweetie, if your water breaks at home, don't leave. And I was like, yeah, okay. But because I was so prodromal, the writing was on the wall for her, apparently. But I just kind of like took her advice, and I was like, okay, if my water breaks at home, maybe we'll call 911 instead of trying to drive to the hospital. For now, we're good. I was dilated. I finally let my midwife check me at my 40-week appointment, and I was already a 4, almost a 5, just walking around, another day in the life, chasing a toddler. And so that's, she had reason to believe that I probably could be a fast laborer, but I didn't really know what she was saying. And so I went into labor with her and had contractions starting that morning, around, I don't even know what time. It was early. Early in the morning, I woke up, went potty, and had some contractions. Because I had been prodromal for so long, I really had a hard time trusting my body on like, is this real or is this not? Which a lot of people that are prodromal can attest to. That is the hardest part, is deciphering what's real and what's not. And so I ignored it for probably about an hour. And I was like, well, if it sticks around for an hour, I'll time a few contractions. And so I got back in bed and ignored my contractions for a little while. I guess that was around like 6 a.m. or so. Yeah. And so I kept contracting. I timed a few, and I was already like 3 minutes apart with my contractions. And so I just really seriously doubted that it was real, because it hadn't like started far apart and kind of ramped up like your normal contraction pattern would. And so I was making my daughter breakfast and switching through some laundry. My husband, we're homesteaders, and so he went out and did some chores with the animals, and he came back in, and he was like, do I have time to mow the yard? I'm like, I don't know, maybe. And he was like, okay, well, I'm just going to jump in the shower, and then we can figure out where we're at. And so he had jumped in the shower, and he got out, and I was like, I really think we should probably go. Because like contractions are starting to get a little bit more intense, but they hadn't really increased in intensity up until that point. They were just really close together. And so we loaded the toddler in the car, and at that point my labor stalled completely. I was like, I knew this was going to happen. I was so frustrated. And so we got in the car, and labor had stalled, and I was like, okay, well, we'll just at least head into town. We live 45 minutes out of town. And so I'm like, well, at least head to my sister's in town, take my daughter, And if I need to labor there for a little while, we can, or figure out what to do next. And anyways, we started driving into town and we were taking back roads to my sister's house. And it was like a pop. My water broke in the car and everything just picked back up again. But really
Ah,
intense. So thankfully, because I am like one of those worst case scenario type thinkers, I did put down like a puppy pee pad on the car seat. I'm like, in the off chance my water were to break in the car, we'll just be prepared. And so I did save the car, which is great. And so we then everything like
I'm sure your husband loved that. He was very
yeah,
grateful, I'm sure.
yeah. And so things picked up in intensity. And so then my husband began to he had to drive really fast to get us to the hospital. And we had called my sister and we're like, never mind, we're not coming to your house, just meet us there. And so thankfully she had pulled in to the hospital parking lot, like at the same time that we had pulled in to the ER, like entrance. And he went in. We had tried calling ahead and they were like, okay, we'll see you when you get here, like kind of brushed it off. And he was like, I don't think you understand. Her body's like already pushing. And so my body had started like involuntarily pushing at that time. And so he went in to try to like tell them we were here and to grab a wheelchair. And he came out and he was like, okay, they actually don't allow the wheelchairs to come out apparently. Which now everybody's like, that's silly. That's an ER. That's not a thing. But apparently whoever was working that day did not want to bring a wheelchair out. And so they were like, oh, just have her walk in. And so he came to get me out of the car and he was like, you're going to have to walk. And I'm like, that's fine. I was still very I was talking between contractions, still very on top of it mentally. And I'm like, that's fine. We'll just wait till this next contraction and then we'll go in. And as soon as I stood up, I'm like, oh, this is not good. The pressure shifted. And I was 2 steps inside the ER entrance. And I'm like, he's trying to give them all of my information to get us checked in at the front desk. And I'm like, oh no, baby's crowning. This baby's coming. Just come take off my shorts. So I can catch the baby. And so he came over. He stopped what he was doing. And of course, the people in the ER that just worked the front desk were probably so traumatized. I joked, I'm like, they probably turned in their notice the next day. But he just immediately came over, stopped what he was doing, and started helping me. And so he helped me take off my shorts. And of course, baby's crowning. And so he catches baby's head. And her shoulders are almost out, and then a flood of 30 people, I kid you not, walk through those double doors from the hospital. And everybody just jumps into action because nobody wants a dropped baby. Nobody wants that paperwork. I was still oh, this is fantastic. This baby is being born. And that was a really smooth and easy, quick labor. And so I pushed her out and she kind of pushed herself out. I was not pushing alongside my body. And he helped catch her. And a nurse jumped in and helped him and they handed her up to me. We looked at her gender. It was all just the chaos in the waiting room of the ER. Thankfully, there was only one other person in there with her daughter and they stepped around the corner. It was a really nutty birth experience. I will tell you that. But I at least delivered my placenta in the labor and delivery room. So we did make it up to deliver placenta. And I remember my nurse midwife that I was working with wasn't there. Obviously nobody was. And so the doctor that was there came in and he was like, are you good? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. And he was like, do you need an IV placed? And I said, no, I'm good. I'm like, why now? We've already done the work. This baby's here. Just send me home at this point. And don't make me pay these medical bills for work that nobody did. But no, it was great. And so I was just on such a high after that birth experience. I truly loved it. I love the adrenaline rush from it. It was such a fun birth experience and a fun story to retell. To this day, my 2.5-year-old is still just a ball of energy. So it was the birth that she needed for her, and it was great.
Wow. Oh my gosh. That is so crazy. I can't even, oh my gosh. Yeah, I was gonna ask, after having the baby, right inside the door, I'd be like, I think I'm just gonna go home now. I'm just walk right back out. No, not really. But yeah, I can't imagine being stuck in a hospital after literally having the baby right inside the door. I love that you said that the mom and the little girl that were in the emergency room like went around the corner because yeah, I mean, I don't know what I would do if it were me. Like
I
that
had
is
no idea.
crazy. I wonder like
I had no idea that they were there. My husband just told me they were there later. Like I was very much so in labor land. Like I was just rolling. I didn't care much about anything, clearly.
yeah, and like I don't know, that's crazy. Like that's a memory that they'll have forever too. I mean, I don't know how old the little girl was, so she may not remember, but the mom will remember that forever. Like she went home and told everybody what happened while she was at the ER.
I'm sure. I'm sure she's traumatized, as is the front desk staff and the security guy that was there. And it's funny, I actually am friends with the postpartum, a nurse on the postpartum floor. She's like a charge nurse, and oversees a postpartum floor. And I asked her about it later, or she actually came by because she saw that I was admitted. And she said that everybody stirred up all this commotion and they're like, somebody just delivered in the ER. And she's like, I knew you were due soon. So I just knew exactly who it was as soon as you walked in because of course you would. Like after all of your, like I kept everybody on their toes whenever I was hospitalized at 18, just like constantly. I mean, my body, I was literally dying. And so
Yeah.
everybody was just constantly on their toes of like, who has to care for Miranda today? And it was just always chaos with me there. And so she's like, of course, Miranda would come in and deliver in the ER and cause a commotion. Uh, but no, I'm sure everybody had a story to tell after that.
That is so crazy. So I'm guessing that after that you were like, let's just stay home
Yes.
next time.
Yeah, I wanted a home birth for my second. As a matter of fact, when I called Zach's aunt, that's a midwife, I was like, can you just come deliver this baby at home? Like, I think that that's why my body is not going into labor, is because it knows it's going to have to leave and go to the hospital. And I've had a good, like, experience with hospitals. And I mean, like I said, there's a place for them, and they truly, that the staff at hospitals have saved my life. Um, and so it wasn't the hospital itself. I think it was just that I just wanted to be home. And I tried to convince my husband to change, like, at 40 weeks. I'm like, I'm just staying home. He's like, no. For good reason. It was just still an unknown of like, okay, how will my body handle this birth? How does an unmedicated birth go differently than the medicated one? And so there was a lot of questions still. And so after that experience, it was truly, okay, my body can clearly do this. So now a home birth is the next step. So I have had, I mean, all three of my births have been incredibly different, but they've all kind of, one has led to my decisions for the next, and for all good reasons.
Yeah, I mean, that totally makes sense. And I am just so excited to hear kind of really what shifted and what made you guys ultimately decide to do a home birth for your third. I know you're 2 months postpartum, so
Yeah.
it's probably still pretty fresh. So I am so excited to hear about that, and I am really intrigued because you guys are homesteaders, so you obviously don't live in the city. You said you live about 45 minutes outside of College Station, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so obviously like kind of making that decision to home birth and finding a provider who can be there for you, who's local and nearby and qualified and all of the things is probably a little bit trickier based on your location. And so yeah, I would love to hear just kind of from the beginning what made you guys ultimately decide to do a home birth and how you went about building your team and planning for that.
Yeah. This one was different altogether, because I was a doula before we got pregnant. And so, just my knowledge of birth had just blossomed so much since even my last one, which truly drove me into being a doula because of all the research I did, to have, like, I was so determined to have an unmedicated birth with her. And so I grew a lot thin whenever I was pregnant with my second. And so I became a doula between my second and third. And And so I had been involved in the birth community at this point and had kind of narrowed down, okay, who would I trust to do a rural home birth, and what does that look like? And I actually chose a brand new midwife. Is she had just finished all of
That
her
is so
licensing.
interesting.
But I did it because I was like, I just really trusted her. And I trust a lot of the midwives here. I work with a lot of them and adore so many of them. And so to make a decision on who I wanted on my team was really hard. But I took my husband and we sat down with her just to like ask her questions, pick her brain, and see how she would handle different scenarios being further out. And we left, and it was honestly my husband that decided on her because he was like, I just feel good. Like, I feel confident in her. And I was like, okay, great. I'm like, she's new. But honestly, the newness and the freshness and just her excitement for birth excited me. Like, midwives can get so burnt out and all this stuff, and birth is always exciting for them. But it's different whenever you come with somebody that's just so fresh. And I just really trusted her skill level, how she would handle different situations. And she had seen a lot. And so it was really good to work with her. And that's kind of ultimately I decided on her because she believed in me and believed in birth, and believed in the way that I went to birth this baby. And so, yeah, and she just gave my husband the comfort he needed to be like, okay, we can stay home, which was big for him because he had been with me whenever I was really sick. And so he had seen me at my worst and had walked with me through all of that. And so for him to feel comfortable was really important to me, for him to just really be able to like relinquish that into a midwife's hands instead of being in the hospital systems.
Yeah, I mean, having a partner who fully trusts your provider and is committed to the same birth that you are envisioning makes a huge world of difference. I would love to hear kind of from again the rural aspect with planning this home birth. How many conversations did you and your midwife or you and your husband have about plan B, C, D, E, what could go wrong potentially, and how you would handle that? Like how many of those kind of conversations did you guys have?
Yeah. Quite a few. I will say, so working with a home birth midwife was very different than working with a hospital midwife, to where a lot of their care is prevention. And so, I really like took care of my body this pregnancy to prevent any like high risk things popping up. And so, and I had a better pregnancy than I did with my second, even being older and it being my third. I would say it was a much better pregnancy than my second. I did routine chiropractic care, routine pelvic floor physical therapy, prenatal massages, just really like watch my diet, my movement, and all this stuff. And you can always do more, but just really worked alongside her and her encouragement of being like, hey, what does your body need? Oh, you're feeling this way. What can we introduce or what can we adjust? And so it really came down to even just laying the foundation of staying low risk. And so, and I knew like with the goal of like a rural birth in mind, we needed to stay as low risk as possible for me and baby. And so I would say we really dove in toward the end. Of course, the initial conversation and consultation, I asked a lot of questions of like, how would you handle this situation? Or what about this situation? Such as like, at what point would you call a transfer? Knowing that it would probably need to be called a little bit earlier than if we were just 5 minutes from the hospital. At what point would you be uncomfortable in baby's care? Like, how much bleeding? Like, postpartum hemorrhage type questions of like, how much is
Mm-hmm.
too much for being where we're at? And how do you manage these things? And so, really was able to dive in a lot in the consultation with her. And then as we went on about pregnancy, it was a lot of prevention. And then toward the end, we kind of circled back to all these answers of like, okay, here's our game plan. It was interesting because I'm not only preparing for a roll birth, but a precipitous roll birth, a home birth. Because chances are, if I was precipitous with with my second, I'm probably going to go about the same or even faster. And so it was a lot of, she came over and did some basic, like, hey, neonatal resuscitation. Like, she left a ton of stuff with us as we set up our room. And so she's like, hey, here are the basics. She said, a lot of this will be instinctual for you. Like, if baby comes out not breathing, you'll probably just jump in very instinctually, but I'm leaving the stuff and I'm showing Zach how to use like one of the bags and stuff, like if the baby needs to be resuscitated after birth. And obviously not like super in depth. And she was very gracious of being like, I don't want to scare you, I don't want to go over all the stuff and it alarm you. So she's like, if at any point this does, like, let's talk about it. But it didn't alarm me in the slightest. And one, because I think I'm in the birth world and so I've seen some stuff to where I'm like, oh, like, some of this stuff is normal processes. And like, here's, what I'm comfortable with, what I'm not. And so it didn't alarm me. It just really empowered me even more to be like, okay, we have a plan in place. My husband is comfortable with the plan in place. He is familiar with where everything is. She left things for like postpartum hemorrhage should that happen. And just really like made sure she seriously left like a precipitous birth kit for us of like, if baby is here is, before I'm here, here's the next steps. And so just really talking that through with her gave us both like a lot of confidence and peace. And just being like, okay, we can handle the situation should the baby come before she makes it. Because we didn't hire the closest midwife to us. She's lived very like South College Station. She was every bit of 45 minutes drive time, but we just knew that it would be okay if she came in a little bit after. And we were both confident in that. And so I also, on the flip side of that, had to mentally prepare for like, if it is not a precipitous birth, how do I handle a longer labor? Because my other one was so fast, I really didn't have time to think about laboring. And so I like was in this catch-22 place of being like, okay, mentally I prepare for a 12-hour labor, but practically we plan for a very fast home birth. And so it was like, okay, how do we prepare for both? But yeah, we just talked through like, what's the closest hospital? Even if it's not labor and delivery, at what point we would go there versus driving all the way into a labor and delivery hospital. And just talking through like all of the plans, what we would do with the kiddos. My other kids that are home, that was a lot of our planning of like, do we need to call somebody, make sure somebody's here with them? Do we send them out to somebody? How do we like manage that? Should there be a transfer? I wanted to make sure somebody was here with them. Yeah, there was just a lot of practical planning for the roll birth aspect and the precipitous birth aspect to just make sure we had all of our I's dotted and T's crossed to handle different situations.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That is so cool. I love what you said about the precipitous labor kit that your midwife left with you. That's genius. But also, I am loving your stories, all of them, because like you did say, they are all very different. But your stories are just so inspiring. I would say like you as a mom are just so inspiring. I love just the way that you approach the whole birthing process, the way you approached it with all three, with such big obstacles or variables and just so much wildness. I mean, to have one of those things, like to have a pre-existing health situation, to deal with COVID, to deal with relocating, to deal with a precipitous birth, to have an emergency room birth, like to have a home birth, like all of these things are all so big and they all have happened to you and it's just wild. And so I'm just so inspired by you and just love hearing your story and just love just how, like I said, like how prepared and educated and confident you guys were in this plan. And so now I want to hear how it went and what happened. Now I want to hear the juicy birth story.
Yeah, it shouldn't take up much more of her time. It was very fast. And I will say, like, whenever you put all these things together, like
You
you
don't
said
say.
it, like you said it, of being like, okay, all these things happen. Whenever you say all those things together, it does seem like a lot. I will say, in the time of like, everything was just dealt with one at a time. And so, each birth was dealt with one at a time. All my medical history was just there one at a time. So whenever you stacked it all together like that, I was like, oh gosh, that sounds like an absolute tornado. But I will say, we've just taken
Yeah. I mean, obviously, yeah,
every
it wasn't happen.
journey.
It wasn't. Yeah, like obviously you didn't have all those things for every single
Yeah.
birth, but like just as a mom, like not many moms experience. I mean, you know this as a doula. Like not many moms experience this many different things. Like not every mom is going to experience a precipitous labor. Not every mom's going to experience a home birth. Most moms are not going to experience delivering on the emergency room floor. Like those are just all so rare like to happen, and so just like the fact that they've all happened to you is just crazy, and I love it.
Yeah, it makes for a lot of fun experiences to pull from, for sure. They are so vastly different. Okay, let's jump
Yeah.
into this third birth, which was like 2 months ago. So again, I was a little bit prodromal, not as prodromal as I was with my second. So part of me was like, is my body doing the work before labor this time? Because the prodromal labor had done so much work with my last one. And so I was like, maybe this will be a longer labor. And I was still a little bit prodromal, more like Braxton Hicksy. Only fell into a cadence a few nights, but not anything like it was with my second. And so I didn't have any like pump the brakes. Is this labor starting or is this prodromal moment? At this time, I didn't call in the team or anything like that. I just was kind of like, oh, I'll know. I'll eventually know. I was very in tune with my body this pregnancy, which was really fun. And my midwife just let me run with it. And so, like, I knew my placenta was anterior before she ever confirmed it. I just knew by the way I felt. And like, by the way, I was carrying pregnancy very early on. There's just a few different things that I was like, the baby's position has to be this, before she would like kind of feel my tummy and see what the baby's positioning was. I was just like, oh no, like this is where the baby's head is. This is where the feet are. I was just extremely in tune with my body, which was really fun. And I think that I've just learned to lean more and more in each pregnancy. And so it was one of those things like for labor, I was like, I'm fine going past due. I was just very at peace if I went past due. Honestly wanted to go past due this time because our house, to add to the storm, our bathroom the shower had leaked and molded our whole subfloor of our bathroom. And so during this pregnancy, we were in the middle of a remodel to completely redo our bathroom and bedroom, of which I wanted to birth in. And so I was like, okay, if I can please go past due this time to make sure I have my bedroom set back up and a bathroom to actually have a baby in and a bed to rest on after and not have to do this in my living room and guest room, that would be fantastic. And so seriously down to the wire, they had finished up the remodel and I was like, surely my body will wait. Like, surely my body will wait until it knows I'm ready, or like till it knows that the space is ready. And it did. And so I was happy to see 40 weeks and actually went to 40 and 2 this time. And so just past 40, and I again woke up, went to the bathroom in the night this time. And so I had woken up around 3 a.m. and maybe just before 3 a.m. Went to the bathroom as one pregnant person does at the very end of pregnancy, very routinely. I went back to bed and I was just laying on my right side and felt a contraction. And I was like, oh, how funny. A contraction in the middle of the night. That's kind of random for me. So I had another contraction and another, and I was like, well, I can sleep through these. These are light. And so I just closed my eyes. And then the what ifs like started kicking in my head. And so I had actually opened up my phone and started journaling to the baby. I did this a little bit more during this pregnancy, which is really sweet. I would write like little notes to the baby. And so I opened up my phone notes and was laying there journaling, and the contractions kept coming, but again, they were still very light, so I didn't time any of them or anything like that. But I could tell that they were kind of back, like they were kind of quick. And so I finally pulled out my contraction timer, and I timed like 3 of them, and they were 2.5 to 3 minutes apart. And so I put up my contraction timer, and I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to close my eyes, and if I can get some rest, then, this will either taper off or things will pick up soon, and I'll know. And so I rolled to my left side to see if I could get the contractions to stop, drank some water, rolled to my left side. And 2 contractions in, I heard a loud pop and my water broke. And so I was like, well, there we have it, folks. That's our answer. So I jumped out of bed super quick and made it over to the tile floor of the bathroom. And my water leaked on the bathroom floor. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll just jump in the shower really quick and clean up the floor. And then I'll wake up my husband whenever, that way he can get a little bit more sleep. But I had 1 contraction after my water broke. And just as it did with my second, I was like, nope, my body is not going to wait. And so I told him, I was like, hey, just trying as calmly as possible to wake him up. But from across the room, I was like, hey, babe, my water just broke. And he flings the covers off and jumped out of bed. Just immediately jumped into action. And I don't even know that he was fully awake yet, but I tell people, I'm like, I fall more and more in love with him every time we have a baby. He's such a champ. And so he changed the sheets, and we called the midwife first, I will say. We did call the midwife pretty quickly after my water broke. And so he called her, and thankfully she was awake at 3 a.m. She was like, I couldn't sleep. I'm like, well, that's the Lord. And and so she just jumped in her car and headed our direction. Zach was changing the sheets, and he would come in. I was in the shower at the time, and he would come in and offer counter pressure. And he brought me my water and turned on my music and just kind of set up the room for me, turned on our twinkle lights that we had strung. And so I was just able to just sit in the shower and continue to contract. And they were more intense after my water broke. And so I was still able to manage them really well, though. But our hot water heater, I was like, I'm either going to be able to fill this bath or I'm going to be able to labor in the shower. There's not having both. And so I opted to turn off the shower and fill the tub. And so I just stood in the shower with my head against a towel that was hanging on the wall. I just leaned my forehead against the towel and just continued in my rhythm of swaying my hips. And between contractions, at one point, I texted my sister because my sister was actually staying that night with us, thankfully. And again, I think my body was just waiting for that, the peace of knowing, okay, the bathroom and bedroom are done, and my sister is here at the house to take care of the older 2 kiddos. And so the timing was just perfect. So I shot her a text, and I was like, hey, I'm in labor, just intercept the kids if they wake up. And then I texted the midwife and warned her that my sister's dogs were on the front porch so that they didn't scare her coming up. And so that was between contractions. So again, I was still very clear, very on top of things mentally, which I was just really thankful for. I had gotten a little bit of sleep beforehand. And so I just continued on my rhythm of swaying my hips, and Zach would come in and again offer some counter pressure, lower back, hip squeeze, whatever I needed at the time. And he was checking on the tub, seeing, making sure the temperature was fine and things like that, and just laying out some towels and getting some stuff last minute ready. We had the room prepped, everything was pretty ready, so it's just those last minute things of okay, these need to be pulled out. And so that was great about the home birth experience. It was we were truly able to set up and prep beforehand. And so yeah, he jumped in, and then my body, again, just like it did with the second, started pushing on its own. And so it did that 1 contraction, kind of started getting really pushy, and I was like, okay. And it started to do it the next time, and I was like, I need to get in the tub. It was just this very much all this urgency of I need to get in the water, which I didn't know if I would have a water birth or not. I again just held that with really open hands of I will do whatever my body feels like doing in the moment. Filled the tub out of just the potential of wanting it. But I was, as soon as my body started pushing, I was like, I'm getting in the tub. I was like, great. And so I just went with that instinct, and Zach helped me over into the tub at 4 a.m. He looked at his watch and he said it was like right 4 a.m. on the dot. And I had gotten over into the tub, and my body like pushed on its own again. And I could tell baby was so, so low. And so I got on my got on my knees and leaned my arms over the back of the bathtub, and pushed again, and she like started crowning. I was like, okay, baby's coming. And my husband just sat there at my back, like he had his hand on my back, ready to help me catch the baby. And I heard my sister's dogs bark, and I was like, oh, sweet, like my midwife is here. I'm like, what perfect timing. Anyway, so my body again just like relaxed and being like, okay, she's here. We can have this baby. She'll be in shortly. No big deal. Everything was just very peaceful for me. I don't know how everybody else felt in the moment, but I just felt very like calm and at peace of being like, okay, I've got this. And so her head came out in that next contraction, and my midwife walked in, and I didn't even know she was in there. She was so great. I told her I wanted just this really undisturbed birth. I'm like, obviously, I do not want a free birth. I want a midwife here, for so many reasons, but I want it to be very mother-led, and I wanted to have that just undisturbed feel. And she respected that and took that to heart so much. And so she came in very quietly. I heard my husband tell her head is out, and she didn't say a word. She pulled out her phone and started videoing and taking pictures for me, because I couldn't get a birth photographer. And so she did that for me, and just like was just a presence in the room that I didn't even know was there. And so I reached down that next contraction. I lifted my left leg and stayed on my knee on my right. And baby came out, and she had the cord wrapped around her head, which isn't an emergent thing. I just didn't see it. And so Zach and my midwife saw it, and they just helped me flip her around the cord and kept bringing her right up to my chest. And it was all like super smooth. Nobody panicked. It was so great. And so I just heard them say, "Oh, cord's wrapped," and so Zach helped flip the baby and bring her back up to my chest. And I just sat there and held her, and sat back, and we still hadn't looked at the gender, and so we were just like sitting there taking in this little baby that we had just met. I felt great. I sat back down, and I was like, oh, do you want to find out the gender? I then at that point made eye contact with my midwife, who was just standing there beside the bathtub. She was just like, oh yeah, like she recorded it for us of us looking at the gender. It was another little girl. So, we have 3 girls now, and it was so fun. And so this birth, I really, really wanted to birth my own placenta. For all weird reasons of being a birth worker. But I have just seen it done in the hospital so many times, in really like not ideal ways. And I trusted my midwife to do it fully. I just really wanted that experience of doing the whole birth process. And so you're still pregnant till you birth that placenta. And I just really wanted to do that myself. And so she had helped me like research and really supported me in doing that. And I was like, even if you catch the baby, like I still want, it was really the plan for Zach to catch the baby, but I ended up doing it just because of the position I was in. But I was like, whoever catches the baby is fine. I just really want to birth my own placenta. And she let me do that fully. And so she just left us in the bathtub, and we were able to just soak in this baby. And I started nursing her to keep those contractions going, to get that placenta out. And she walked in, and she was like, hey, it's been 30 minutes, just so you know. But there was like no pressure of like, hey, we need to get placenta here. Nothing was urgent. She was just like, just so you know, it's been about 30 minutes. Just wanting to like feel you out, see how you wanted to proceed. I was like, oh, great. I think my placenta's already released. I'm just chilling here in the bathtub. And so I was able to like reach down. It was not pulsating anymore. And so I like gently kind of gave a little tug on my cord just to see if there was some release to it. And it immediately just came out. And so I just gently like guided my cord to where I could feel the placenta at the end, and pushed out my placenta really smoothly. And I was so proud of that moment. Like, I held up my placenta like it was a trophy. There's a picture of me with baby latched on one side and me holding my placenta up with the other hand, just like smiling so big because I was just, it was really neat to like be able to like do my whole birth process. And I felt so supported by my whole birth team. And again, going back to like just choosing a birth team that believed in birth and believed in me and my intuition, really came to that. And so, yeah, that's the birth of that baby. I got to get back in my bed afterwards. My 4-year-old heard the baby crying. And so she comes running. Baby was born at like 4. I had my first contraction right around 3. Baby was born just after 4. So it was an hour long birth process. And so anyways, we got back in bed and my 4-year-old came through the doors and she was like, "Can I come in?" We were like, "Of course." And she climbed up in the bed with us and got to help our midwife and us do the whole newborn measurements. And we took pictures and it was super sweet to have her a part of that process. And then later, my 2-year-old woke up and came barreling through the doors and was just so obsessed with the little babe that she got to come in and meet. So that was really sweet. I really enjoyed that part of the home birth, was just like getting to welcome them into our room afterwards and let them meet their new sister without like having to coordinate, oh, who has the kids and how do we do this introduction. It was just a very natural part of the process. And we just went on about life from there. And it was really sweet to not have to have this like giant transition.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Oh my gosh, though, an hour, like just over an hour of labor is wild. Um, so I have a couple of questions though. One, you had mentioned just like how peaceful this birth in particular was, but also you have very fond memories of your first 2 births as well. I often hear from moms who have these like super short precipitous labors, um, that it's a whole nother level of intensity. Like they often refer to feeling like they just got like hit by a truck and it just took them out. Um, and it was just so fast. Like a lot of them wish that like maybe if their labor hadn't been so fast, maybe it wouldn't have been so intense and so painful. And so I'm wondering, like, did you not experience it that same way? Were you like able to kind of cope and handle each contraction as it came, even in such a short, quick manner?
Yeah, I will say, so my second birth was my first precipitous birth. And I did feel like I had been hit by a bus after that one. I still loved the labor. I was really distracted with my toddler during that labor though. And so it was like, I didn't really have time to slow down and think about what was possibly happening. I had no idea that's how fast that baby would be born. And so I was like somewhat naive, like blissfully naive through that labor. And so I didn't know, and I had an epidural with my first. And so though I felt contractions and even Pitocin contractions with my first before I ever got the epidural, with the second, I was like, oh, these contractions are cake compared to what my Pitocin contractions were. And so I just had no idea that that's how far along my body was. I learned a lot about my body with my second, but I did have a harder postpartum recovery after my second because my body truly like felt like it had been hit by a bus. So while my mind was like, that was incredibly empowering and so awesome, my body was like, what just happened to us? And I actually got shingles after her birth. I think that was my body's like response to that super fast labor and birth. And so my goal with my third was for it to be peaceful, so that my body like could stay caught up with my mind. I wanted to make sure like I had mentally prepared enough for one, a really long labor, because that could have happened. But 2, another precipitous birth, so my body wasn't caught off guard if that did happen. And so I just like had really thought through like, okay, what if this one's fast as well? And so that really helped. And also just staying at home, I think helped like keep my body, like there was no sense of fight or flight in this birth. Like I think my whole body was just truly at peace, with my atmosphere, with my support. I didn't mention her, but my midwife had an assistant midwife come too, and she made it somehow between baby's delivery and placenta's delivery. So she was also here. Again, just came in so quiet and just so supportive. And so I really do think that I didn't feel that way this time because of my atmosphere and my team.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So, another thing I feel like I'm curious about, and I'm feeling like others might be curious about too, if you don't mind sharing, with especially those two precipitous labors, but really just in general, because I mean, a first time induction and, um, medicated first time mom, like it's common. Did you experience any tears with your births?
With my first, I did. Delivering on my back with an epidural. That 6 pound, 12 ounce baby, I did tear, very minor, like a very minor tear. But I did with her. And with my second, she was so fast. She was 8 pounds, 8 ounces, and I did not tear a lick, like not a bit. And
Wow.
so with my third, she was 8 pounds, 3 ounces, and I also didn't tear with her. And I think truly being able to deliver in upright positions, and like my body delivering, like my body doing the pushing on its own, baby stretched everything in the right speed. And I was in tune with my body, and as to where like my first, I had an epidural, so I was pushing without feeling what was going on. And so I didn't have like that control over it. And
Mm-hmm.
also, it was just my first, and a lot of times, first time moms will tear. Just that's the first time a baby passes through that vaginal canal, so that can happen. But thankfully, my tear wasn't bad, and it was pretty easy to heal from.
Yeah, yeah, that was kind of why I asked because I know for first time moms, tearing is common, um, or at least very normal. And then, but also I would imagine that with precipitous births, tearing can also be normal because they just come out so fast that sometimes your body just isn't ready for it. Um, so kind of to wrap things up, I would love to kind of get some suggestions or advice that you may have for anybody listening. One who is planning a rural birth, especially one that is a home birth, or lives in a rural area and is not quite pregnant yet, but wants to kind of know what they should be thinking about and planning for. And then also, obviously, some suggestions on how to mentally prepare for a birth that could be precipitous, because obviously we don't have any way of knowing that until after the fact. So, yeah, just any sort of words of wisdom that you have would be great.
Yeah. As far as rural birth goes, a lot comes down to the birth team that you choose, and just being confident in them. Going back again to choosing a birth team that supports rural birth, like that's not foreign to them. And but also giving that chance to the first time like midwife solely practicing, they are going to be pretty cautious. And so that's really great as well. But just making sure you choose somebody that really has thought through all of the scenarios for you, and will think through all of the scenarios with you, and has the patience and capacity to slow down enough to answer all of your questions. Even questions that you don't know that you have at the time as y'all go through the process. To have a midwife that really is able to slow down and listen is a gift. And so a lot of that, I think, goes down to birth team and their willingness to help you prepare, and think through all of the different scenarios of like transfer situations, or all the what ifs, and like just making sure they've been out to your house plenty of times if you live in the sticks, like the practical things of that, like making sure the whole team knows how to get to your house in the middle of the night, and open your gate and not let out the cows and all this stuff. Like it really does come down to like a lot of these fine-tuned details, to make it a smooth process. And then precipitous birth. Okay, I have a hard time with this, because I never want to give a mom's hopes up. Like a lot of my doula clients don't know my birth stories. I don't really talk about my birth experiences with them, because everybody's body births so differently. And I never want them to feel like, oh, you know how to do this quickly. I'm going to sign up for this, because it can be wild. Like precipitous birth can sometimes be just as long as or just as hard as a really long birth. But I never want like my first time moms to like get their hopes up on a precipitous birth or plan for a fast labor. I'm always like, let's plan for the really long one, the one where we need a lot of endurance and a lot of just perseverance of like, hey, we can get through this together. But I will warn a few of my clients about precipitous birth whenever they kind of show those red flags of like, oh, this could be headed in this direction. But mostly if they're like really prodromal or second, third, fourth time moms. And so like we'll talk through it more in those scenarios because I'm also the mindset of like, hey, that really caught me off guard with my second. So I don't want it to catch somebody else off guard. But even my first time moms, I'll mention it normally at least once and be like, hey, we don't know what your birth is going to be like. We don't know how you're going to labor. And it can be on both ends of the spectrum, really fast to really long. So I want you to like mentally prepare for both different scenarios because like, yeah, precipitous can really feel like a whole hurricane just hit you. I mean, it's a really wild feeling, especially if you have no idea what to expect as a first time mom. I've had a client have her baby within an hour and a half as a first time mom, which is like unheard of. Like you don't hear of that happening very often. And I'm like, I probably didn't prepare her well enough for that to potentially happen because you don't see it with a first time mom very often. And so now it's a part of my language more so of being like, okay, we want to think on both ends of the spectrum, but don't get your hopes up that it'll be super fast because I want you prepared for like the endurance side of things of a longer one, but mentally prepared for both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing advice. And I would absolutely agree. Um, Gosh, I like am just still processing everything. I'm just so blown away by you and your stories and so honored. I'm grateful that you would share them with me, and with anyone who listens. And I know that there's just so many amazing nuggets and just parts of your stories that so many moms are going to be able to take away. Um, After they hear this. And so I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here and for being so open and sharing your story with us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm an open book, so if anybody ever has questions,
Yeah.
I'm always happy to connect and answer anything. I think that's part of being a birth worker in general. We're always happy to talk about anything birth related. There's no such thing as TMI. And so I always appreciate the opportunity to share a
Absolutely.
little bit of my testimony, but just my birth stories as well. If it helps mamas out in how they prepare and how they choose to birth their babies.
Yes, absolutely. And then just in case anybody wants to connect with you um, outside of this episode, I will go ahead and put your website and social media handles and all of that stuff in the show notes.
Yeah, that's great. I'm just Miranda Sladen everywhere, so it's pretty easy to find me on Instagram. That's what my website is too, is just mirandasladen.com. So I will send that over to you so you can put that in the notes.
Perfect. Great. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Samantha.